This is Call with Dad's podcast, where today's issues, concerns, and joys of being a dad are discussed, with your hosts E.A. Maynard and Mr. Pancake sharing their views, experiences, and all things they know. Join the journey with us. Welcome to Call with Dads, more than a podcast or a website, but your home for a community of dads who want to be better. Now let's get started.
M.A. Franklin, if you could, how about we just get started then and start digging into the conversation. We found you, or I found you on X, and in one of your newsletters I signed up for, which I love your newsletters. Lots of great information, lots of stuff to get out of there. But the one that caught my attention was the one that you wrote about spanking. And I think the original, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but it was about how people were trying to misinterpret the scriptures in the Bible for using spanking or gentle parenting, as it's being called, versus the old spare the I forget the saying now, but basically don't use the rod or don't strike the kid. And in your newsletter and in the article that's on your website, it says that concept is completely wrong, considering the Bible is talking about spanking your child, disciplining your child is not going to hurt your child.
Mm-hmm.
Could you kind of start off? We'll start
Yep.
off discussing this, and then also let us know a little bit about yourself along the way, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So the whole idea comes from Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, and you get a lot of justification for gentle parenting, as they sort of twist and pull just a few of the Proverbs verses, and they say, because the Proverbs talks about the rod a lot. So you get folly is bound up in the heart of the child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child gets his own way, brings shame to his mother. There's all sorts of things that talk about the rod, and so they will try to say that, well, this is a shepherd's rod, and a shepherd doesn't hit his sheep. He guides them. He gently persuades them. He pushes them a little bit in certain directions. He's not going to attack his sheep. That's not what a good shepherd does. But they completely ignore the rest of the rod passages. So you have Proverbs 23:13 through 14. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with a rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. So save him from death. He's not going to die. You'll actually keep him from death. And so, I mean, that's not ambiguous at all. That's pretty clear. And so you got to let Scripture interpret Scripture. And that's, I mean, there are some hard sayings and things that are open to interpretation in Scripture, but that's really not one of them.
Understand. And I mean, like, I guess the big thing right now is everyone is trying to push away from spanking, and you even talk about there's a right way and a wrong way of doing it, which I agree with quite a bit. And I believe spanking is a very valuable. Even Mr. Pancake has posted out there that he supports spanking when it's done properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, generally, if I was like, there's a video out right now at the time that we're recording this that's going around social media pretty well, where a kid's just getting wailed in some kind of store.
That looked like a grandfather, actually, rather than like a father or somebody.
Wow.
It was either a grandfather or an older dad or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen that video or not.
I have not seen it, but I mean, I've seen videos like it. I've seen things like that happen in real life. But yeah, the point of spanking isn't to humiliate the child, and hopefully there's always a private place to do something like that. And it is harder when you're out in public, and it takes a lot more effort and patience. But it's still going to bear fruit.
Yeah.
So and this is kind of my opinion, is I think quite a few people that are against spanking, it's building up either they got spanked a lot as a child and to them they don't want to repeat that kind of action, or it's they have anger issues, kind of like what it seemed like in that video that I'm discussing, where the guy just wails on the boy's butt in the store, slams him down in the chair, and yells at the kid next to him to stay sitting. And to me, that screamed that guy has anger issues out both ends of him and just needs to figure out what he's doing. What do you think that in your experience, your views and things like that that you've seen, does it come across as more of an anger issue that these people have that's either taking spanking way beyond what it needs to be, or the people that are going to the other extreme and saying, I will never touch my son's butt?
Yeah, there are two different ditches, of course, and I don't really see a lot of the wailing. And I grew up, it wasn't really that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or the borderline abuse that it can turn into. And I think a lot of these people who do gentle parent or speak out against spanking or have such a visceral reaction against it, they do have that personal experience with it. When they hear the word, that's what they think. They think public humiliation, they think bruises, they think slaps to the face, they think maybe that their parent was just always angry and just getting revenge for messing up. Like there was no grace, there was no mercy, so it's understandable. But the problem is that these people are acting as evangelists that are going to cause a lot more problems and sort of bleed their trauma over everyone else. And so that's why it's just a topic it's sort of just in the rotation because it's
Right.
people have been avoiding spanking their kids for thousands of years. It's just the fact. That's why Solomon talked about it thousands of years ago.
Right.
People have always been skittish about it, and so this is nothing new. And so it's always in the rotation, and it always gets some kind of uproar. You always get the, well, I don't hit my child type of self-righteous nonsense. But it is what it is.
I understand that. I mean, Mr. Pancake, what's your view on this? And because obviously I've made mine pretty clear that I'm pro spanking, and so far where I stand.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm also pro spanking. You know, I don't see any issues with it. What I do see is a lot of parents, like you said, they either have some sort of experience or, I mean, you know, let's be honest here, social media and nonsense have really portrayed things to where they almost got a level of brainwashing people to believe things that aren't true with their own eyes. You know, to see something with your own eyes and they believe something else, whatever media has told them. And there's so much social media and news and this and that tells people, oh, you leave a mark on your child or you do a little spanking. It's, you know, it's some sort of abuse or, you know, deeper thoughts, and everybody who doesn't spank and actually could teach their child this or that or the other is so much more virtuous and better than you. You know, so there is a lot of that going around, and that actually to me is pretty bad. In my eyes, a spank is quite necessary, because if you actually sit there and think about it, when you try and think about mentally manipulating a 4 or 5-year-old, when you try to explain the details of other people's emotions and feelings and how they shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that or why they shouldn't, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. You know, I mean, if you go outside, take a kid outside, and you're playing in the driveway, and the kid bolts to the street. You know, how many times does that happen for your 3-year-old or whatever, and you gotta go run and scream after him? Well, if you go, don't do that again, please, that car could hit you. That kid has no idea about what death is. You could explain it to him until you're blue in the face. There's no idea.
Right.
You know what I mean? It does. So it doesn't. It makes zero sense to do that, because the next day he's going to do the exact same thing, and then one day your kid's going to be, squashed under a car crying, and then somebody's going to hurt your feelings. You should have spanked them. So there are certain levels of it. I like that video that dude. I mean, he was so angry over whatever it was that he actually hit the kid in the leg a couple times. He wasn't even spanking. He was just hitting the kid, and that's incorrect. So I have made a pact with my wife. Me and my wife, we go out of our way to not spank, just simply because there should be, mildly other ways, but we're also realistic. You know what I mean? Like I just discussed about the bolting to the street idea, so if I am in a position I'm too angry, or I'm mad, or something has got me in an uproar where I'm going to whoop my child, I take a step aside. We switch. She takes over the discipline, and then when I come back later, if spanking is worth it, then I'll talk to her. She'll have to accept it, and I'll give her a spanking or whatever it is. It's very rarely that I get mad in the situation, snatch her pants down, and whoop her on the tush. Because that doesn't explain the discipline. It doesn't set the tone for whatever you did. It's just incorrect. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, the lesson learned is don't make daddy angry, and not
right.
And that's not really
correct. And that's not what I'm
really what you want them to learn. Yeah.
Right. Don't
I'd
piss
agree
dad off.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. If you're seething in anger, you're definitely not qualified to spank in that moment.
Right.
But again, it gets to that point.
Yelling and everything too.
Yeah, really yelling the same way. But again, a lot of people get to that snapping point because they're too permissive, or they have allowed things to go on too far because they have avoided their own response. They have abdicated discipline, either because it's not convenient at that time, or they're doing something else, whatever. And so they wait, and so the kid keeps doing something, and then finally it just blows up in anger. Yeah. Which if they had done it at the first instance, it could have been calm. But again, it's harder to do it at that point.
That's something that I've been telling my wife for almost 6 years now.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's a hard lesson to learn. Because you don't,
it is.
You have, especially if everything is fine, you have a peaceful household, your kid starts doing something that's wrong, but you don't really want to disrupt that peace.
Right.
But all you're doing is kicking the can down the road a little bit.
Right.
It's going to just get worse and worse. So I get it. I've been in the same boat, and but it really is our own anger is our own problem, and it's 100% our responsibility, not the kids. So
now let me bring up something. I'm gonna jump. Sorry to interrupt you. But I'm gonna bring up something that goes off both what you kind of both have said here. Is one, the social media, what parents are seeing, they're being made to feel like if they don't do it a certain way, you see people posting out there, if you do this, you're a weak father. If you do this, you're weak. And typically in a guy's mind, well, I'm not going to do something that makes me look weak, or extremes either this way or that, kind of like what you said, the brainwashing. But then I also thought about when you talked about basically giving the responsibilities, advocating the responsibilities off instead of spanking your child, disciplining them when there should be. So one, the anger is not there, and you have enough level head to actually do it so that it can be done properly. Do you think that between technology, social media, the fact that more and more parents are giving their kids tablets and phones so that they can just say, hey, do whatever you need to do. I need to send out an email, or I need to play my game, or whatever it might be. I almost feel like it's starting to seem like a larger trend that parents are not really wanting to be parents in action, but just name.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
definitely true. Children are more a lifestyle talisman that they can wave around, a badge of honor to show their status. And you see that the most extreme version of that is probably the trans. If you have a trans child, well, then you're just your upper echelon status. And if you're so supportive and so understanding and so progressive, then that is
so much more virtuous than everybody
yeah.
else.
Then
Right.
so much more empathetic. That is the ultimate status symbol, at least these days. Hopefully that's going to come crashing to a halt at some point. But yeah, it's
To me, you just
yeah.
look like a pedophile creep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and yeah, I mean that's a perfect example. Is all this trans stuff going on in the schools, in general public, even some churches now are
Mhm.
pushing the idea, which I find very despicable.
Yeah.
But
That's more abusive than, I mean, if you were to punch your kid in the face.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah. The black eye will heal.
Yeah, right.
yeah. The problem is it seems like a lot of parents, like you said, are trying to virtual signal all this. So
Mm.
the parents that are trying, it's almost like I grew up in a small town, and I remember everyone finds it funny when I mention I've been kicked out of 5 churches in my lifetime. One was because I dated the preacher's daughter. Another one was because of a rumor, and the others were because I questioned each pastor about something in the Bible they didn't have the answer to. So I see a lot of churches that I've been through where it's more about status and symbol, and I've seen the people that goes to churches that are basically saying I'm holier than thou now, but come Saturday night, come Monday morning, they're drinking, smoking, doing almost every one of the deadly sins that they can do to try to entertain themselves. And instead of trying to live a good life, live a life that sets examples for their kids, they're more interested in that virtual signal.
Mhm.
Honestly, I haven't. I think my best friend I've had since I was we age. I don't even remember how old we were now, but I haven't talked to him in months, and that's not even through text messages. As a parent, my life is so consumed with spending time with my family, which makes me very happy. To me, my kids learning their success, trying to make sure that they're better than me is important. Is I have the phrase, be better so they can be better. And I spout that out quite a bit because I believe it so wholeheartedly. And it's it really bothers me to see these parents who are simply damaging their kids, destroying a future generation of kids that will become weak, will not know anything, and will also be doing God knows what when it's all said and done. And I always say, if you're atheist, if you're whatever religion you are, Christian, what so have you, more power to you. There's power in teaching religion, even if you don't follow it, because of the virtues that can be taught. It seems that this virtual signaling is trying to virtual signal also that people are not following any religion or following the true heart of the religion.
They're following a religion. It's called
Yeah.
Wokeism?
technology. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
technology, wokeism. That's the religion. They're getting
They're
fame. They're
they're just
getting,
as devoted
yeah,
to their
uh,
God
right.
as a committed Christian is to theirs.
Yeah,
It's
their
just a
God
different
is
God.
their phone, is
Yeah.
their self, and their God is other people. But the problem is they don't view that as a God. You know, they're not afraid of it. They don't worship it. They just basically bow to it, and that's it. They just continually stick to it. So that's the difference between the two. It's pretty weird to see all these people, and it's even I know we don't really talk too much about the Bible and stuff like that, but it even talks about this type of stuff in the Bible, how people get stuck, and they bow to another god, and the god is just technology and fame.
I do think you're right that without social media, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be near as big of a deal, because
Right.
there is just so much affirmation and social contagion involved in that. It's like if things happen, they were quarantined within a local community, and now these abominations are just they can be spread throughout the entire world. And so
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think COVID, I know everybody hates the conspiracy theories, but a lot of stuff during COVID and from COVID was, I believe a lot of it was planned on purpose, because you saw how quickly just simply going to the store to grocery shop it was probably like maybe 5% of the people would do the Walmart pickup or the Amazon groceries, and now it's almost like 50% of people don't even go grocery shopping anymore. And it was like what, overnight, you know what I mean? And I believe a lot of that stuff is thought out and planned on purpose, so it's just simple things like that. And now more people spend more time on the internet and Facebook and Twitter, well, X or whatever else you call it these days, and all these other different platforms than they do just sitting around, hanging out with their family. It's weird when my wife's parents come over, and they're like extremely old fashioned. So they come over and they will literally just sit there and hang out and chit chat with each other and talk. It's interesting to see stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of people get this virtue that they feel they're better, but it's all through brainwashing. All these social media influencers and all these, and they don't realize, God forbid you tell somebody that follows, one of these famous people or one of these influencers, that this influencer is paid by a company to act this way and do these things, whether they believe them or not. That was that dude with the Bud Light stuff. For all he could not even be gay. He just does that for the, because they pay him to do it in front of a camera. And so that's part of the problem. And a lot of these social media influencers are getting paid to tell you, oh, spanking's terrible, spanking's this, spanking's that. And then they, if you never noticed, they put an ad for a mental health this or mental health that. It's like, well, come on. You have mental issues because your parents let you do whatever you want when you were a kid. Now you got 25-year-old parents that had parents that maybe they were spanked a little harsher, and now today they're like, oh, I'm not going to spank. It's not appropriate, this now, because they're, on social media and TV and all this stuff. So they weren't spanked, and now they're not spanking their kids. And now their kid today, in 2024, their kid's 15, and what is like, and then LA is like, oh no, crime is totally legal as long as it's under $900. So now you got 15 and 16-year-old kids like, well, nobody's gonna whoop, so you can go to the store and just steal everything, and then go beat up old people in the street. And it's just like a trickle effect. A lot of people don't realize that. And I was actually reading your article thing, and it makes clear sense. A lot of the stuff I was saying or thinking about earlier. At a certain point, you're not going to be spanking a kid anymore. You're not going to spank a 13-year-old kid. Especially like a 15 or 16-year-old boy. He's probably the size of you. Backhand you back. But that's where setting that precedence in early years. when they start doing all this stuff, you're not, like you said, you're not whipping the kid, out of anger and all that stuff, but you need to instill a set of discipline, especially at a young age. Start young, teaching them that they need to have manners and respect. That way, when they're 8, 9, 10, you don't have to do that stuff. There's a point in time when you aren't going to be spanking your child, and if it has to come down to where you have to hit your child to get them to listen when they're 15 years old, there's a problem.
Yeah, that's something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, if you do it right, most of a kid's spankings are going to come before they're 6 years old.
Right.
And there might be some more, but it's more like weeding the garden as opposed to just completely strip mining the soil, and starting afresh. Yeah, you're not just wailing on the kid all the time. That's another misconception.
Yeah.
That people think about spanking. You're just always beating the kid. I mean, you might go through a day where it feels like it. But kids learn fast.
Yeah.
And if you do it right and are consistent, then after they're 5 years old, they've got the message, and they've created the appropriate boundaries for certain things, and they've associated your voice with certain types of authority, and so it's, especially if you've done it in a loving way and kept relationship throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
And so it definitely bears fruit.
Yeah. Another thing to add.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Another thing to add on to that is, and I've said this multiple times as well, is like my daughter's 2 years old, and even when I give her a little whack on the butt, she has the cushion on her butt, and then she has a diaper on, and then her clothes on, and especially now that it's chilly out, it's thicker pants. So it's more of a mental, and like you said, if you're doing it right, at least how I see it, it's more of a mental click than a physical. So
they get that harsh feeling of authority.
Right. If you smack them on the bench and say, no, that is bad, instead of saying, no, don't do that, they're going to get mixed signals if you're talking to them all sweet and innocent, instead of saying no, because, like you said, kids learn quickly. So a lot of times, like, my daughter seems to be incredibly more stubborn than my son. And she literally sets out to do things intentionally to see if she can get away with it, because I will say no, she will stop, and I will use a firm voice when I say it. She'll look back at me and say no, and then go and do it. I'm like, get down or get spanked. I give her a couple warnings. She looks at me and goes, down. I'm like, okay. So I come over, I lift her up, I smack her on the butt lightly. Again, 2 years old, heavy, thick pants, diaper, and a little baby butt. So, and I even said, usually the strength that I hit is usually the same amount that my cat's smacking the kids. So when they're play fighting, my cats don't attack the kids on a regular basis, but the whole play fighting thing. And when I talk about spanking, people sit there and go, well, how can you beat your children? And there's even a guy that I'm trying to get scheduled on who's just completely the opposite opinion as us. And I got drawn to his account and his information because he had a poll on there. Do you consider spanking a child to be as bad as shooting a person, fighting somebody in self-defense? I mean, everything was literally shy of killing someone.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are you trying to say that you believe spanking a child is like beating a grown man or shooting somebody to save your life? That's ridiculous to think that.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to hearing his voice, his opinion on that. But that's also part of the reason I invited him on, is because I knew we would be having this conversation as well.
Yeah. A lot of the gentle parents advocates, all they know how to do is guilt trip.
Yeah.
And so you see it with their kids. And so where they're trying to emotionally manipulate them, they're saying things like, well, you know how that makes daddy feel. You know how that makes mommy feel. You don't want to disappoint, like as if their emotions are the child's responsibility, which is
Right.
a terrible weight to put on
Yeah.
on a child like that. And so that's really all they know how to do. And so when they come to the debate about spanking, they will also manipulate language in order to guilt trip people and say, well, don't hit your kids. They never say spanking. They always
Yeah.
say hit. They never actually use the actual word that we're talking about. And so that's
Right.
always a clue to me that they're not actually a serious person about the whole conversation. I will listen to an argument with someone who's actually honest, but not someone who's going to try to poison the well immediately
Right.
and try to guilt trip me into something that really isn't true.
Right.
There's no condemnation for me. I have a completely clean conscience about this. It's not going to work. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and you making a comment about that whole emotional manipulation thing. So I can use my biological dad, who wasn't really that great or that much into my life growing up. When I did see him, he would always go, well, what you did disappoints me. And like you said, try to use emotional manipulation.
Mhm.
And at first it was like, oh, okay, well, I feel bad that you're feeling bad or something like that as a kid. And then as a teenager, it turned out every time he said it, I looked at him and said, so? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you take care of yourself. I'm going to take care of myself. I don't feel bad because you feel bad. I don't have, now mind you, I might be the exception because my level of empathy is only extended to my close family and very close friends. Outside that, I look at people, I'm like,
Yeah.
you kind of brought that on yourself.
There's going to be
Yeah.
a point where your kid's going to eventually recognize you're a grown up.
Right.
You need to grow up. So that makes sense. I'm the same way. I'll admit wholeheartedly, I am guilty of accidentally doing that. Obviously, I go out of my way to not do that, but I have done that. I'm like, you're just going to make me madder. You know what I mean? And my wife points out, all the time. We have this thing, like if you're doing something out of like, feelings, or, you don't realize you're doing it, what I mean? Because it happens,
Mm-hmm.
she'll be like, or something like that, just kind of make me go, oh, right. And I'll do something like that. And she was reading a couple books about parenting and all this stuff. And, some of them are all right, but some of it you got to take with a grain of salt. It's just garbage.
Yeah.
But some of it does make sense. And when you say things like that, using those kind of mental manipulations, in a way, you're giving your child control over you. The child doesn't control me. I control it, or her, him, or whatever. I control the child. I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I'm the dad. It's that simple. And until they turn 18, go get a house of their own, a wife and a child, or in my daughter's case, a husband, and all this other stuff, and have their own stuff, earn their own way, then they're the boss. But until then, I am. And when you tell them, you're just making me mad, or you're just going to make me upset if you do that, you're giving them the control to be able to do that. And that's we all know how a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old operates. Ooh, fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it more.
Yeah. And that's a good lesson to teach too.
Yeah.
That I'm responsible for my feelings. You're going to be responsible for your feelings. And that's an extremely important lesson that fewer and fewer people have learned these days.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Too many people these days are like, oh, well, my feelings, you're going to hurt my feelings. Nobody cares.
The only people who say they care are trying to use you to get more power. And that's about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, for sure.
And that just brings up the fact of a lot of people out there are goes back to us stating virtual signal, this and that, where people seem to be more concerned about how they look than what they're trying to achieve. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there where people are talking about, well, I don't have kids because I want to do this and that. you know, those people, I don't agree with their message, but at least they're self-aware enough to know that if they had kids, they're not going to be good parents. So I kind of
Mhm.
go with that, but on the same note, I was a horrible person before I met my wife in all truth. But and I've heard it said that what you really don't become, at least for a perspective of a man, you don't really become a man until you get married and you have responsibilities, and you fully become a man once you become responsible for a child. And I hold that very true. And a lot of that's kind of why I subscribe to your newsletter that you have out, because a lot of the stuff I see you put out has a lot of great information, views, and you support it with facts either from the Bible or from somewhere that you can point out. So it's not just random, I feel that you should do this because. And I mean,
Not just
it's
pure opinion
interesting.
either.
Yeah, and that's what there's opinion. Obviously, you do have your
Yeah.
opinions in your writing. Don't get me wrong. You can't,
Mhm.
it's very hard to write anything for any reason without having some opinion in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Right.
wouldn't be interesting
Right.
if you didn't have that, didn't have some
Right.
space.
Exactly. I mean, so where do you think parents, like new parents, somebody that just found out that they're about to have a kid, and they're sitting there going, okay, well, I see all these people talking about gentle parenting, or who knows, whatever the current name for that current type of parenting is, lazy parenting, no
Mhm.
parenting, free range. Well, there's free range homeschooling. Well, no, there is. I think there's a free range homeschooling where you kind of let your kids learn freely and this and that. But the whole concept of just whatever they decide to name it, the whole concept of not touching, not spanking, not doing anything and trying to use, like you said, emotional manipulation, try to manipulate words, trying to manipulate their child. What what do you suggest a parent that's just about to come out and welcome his first child? What would you tell that person? Because as a parent, right now I'm on my second child. My son's coming up to be 6. My daughter, like I said, is 2. I've kind of gone through the rodeo with my son, and I'm at the end of that for the most part. But my daughter, so I know what I'm doing there for the most part. Obviously, different situations. My daughter, my son are obviously 2 different people. But and I realize I'm rambling again. But what do you suggest if I was a new parent? What would you tell me?
Um, I think first I would ask, would you like to enjoy the company of your children?
Hmm.
And that's a big thing, not only now but in the future. Do you want to enjoy their company where they don't annoy you, they don't annoy other people, um, and really, disciplining and raising your children isn't just an act of love for the child itself, but for every other person that child is going to come in contact with for the rest of their lives. It's not something that just has to do with you, it just has to do with them. Like all this stuff sloshes out everywhere else. So it does matter. Um, I think there's one book written by Brian Kaplan called More Selfish Reasons to Become a Parent. He's basically, the whole argument for the book is basically parents don't matter. The kid's going to just grow up to be whatever, no matter what. Really, their peers matter and all this other stuff, which I think is nonsense.
Hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
but that it's all almost the same side of of the coin as a gentle parenting thing. Um,
Yeah.
I would I would honestly point them to the proverbs that say that people have been worried about this for thousands of years. It's not a new problem, but it is a well-trod path. You don't have to clear the forest yourself, um, and for books, honestly, Dobson's Dare to Discipline is still, I think it was written in the late 70s. It's still highly relevant, and it's still super controversial because people just don't seem to be getting the message. And it's even controversial in the Christian world. Like I just read another book called Habits of the Household, and it's about family habits and how, the everyday normal of your life is basically what your life is, and what your kids will grow up into. That's the catechism that your kids are going to be trained in. Your normal. So what is your normal? And for the most part, the book is good, but the chapter on discipline, he just tiptoes around the idea of spanking, and all that. So even a Christian book written for Christian audiences is going to tiptoe around the topic,
Yeah,
which is just a travesty.
because they try to make it controversial more these days.
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous. So I would recommend Dobson's Dare to Discipline more. That it's still relevant, and I would just reiterate that the kid has a cushioned area, natural cushioned area that seems made for spanking, and it's not. Honestly, you're going to make them happier. Do you want miserable kids or happy kids? And like, I remember one scene in an airport. I was waiting in a very crowded terminal, and there was this one little boy. I think he was probably 7 years old, 7 or 8, and he was just flopping on the ground, screaming. And then his dad was walk over, pick him up, and then put him next to the rest of the family. And then the kid would run over, just keep running around, and he would bang on the play with his toy, bang it on the vending machine. His dad would come over, pick him up, and he would scream and hit, and it's like, that dad is miserable, that kid is miserable, everyone in this room is miserable, and all it would have taken was going to the bathroom and 10 seconds of spanking. That's it. Like 10 seconds, the problem would have been fixed.
Right.
And so, what are you really doing here? The whole thing about I lost the train of thought.
Well, going off and taking your kid off at that age, like I can relate. I was about to make the joke of I think I was on the same flight because literally I've seen, and I think I've mentioned it on the show before, where I've sat at an airport because I used to fly a lot for work, and it wasn't just a one-time situation, but multiple times where kids would throw a fit. I had a kid once throw a fit and just smack my newspaper out of my hand. So, and yes, this was back when newspapers were still common and easy to pick up. But the parent just kind of looked at the kid, and when I looked at him and said, "Are you going to do anything?" Like, "Oh, well, they'll calm down." Well, if you would have raised your kid, disciplined them, and teach them not to throw fits, you wouldn't have to. Exactly. And your story kind of makes me think of at 7 or 8 years old. I mean, at that point, you should be able to sit there. Like I can tell you, my son right now, if I said, "Hey, stop, come here, sit down, let's talk, let's read a book, let's do something. Why are you trying to act this way?" He's going to do it. But now, mind you, there's always going to be those situations. But he also knows if you're going to throw a fit, throw it in at home, not in public. Public, you respect other people, and that's something we've driven in to try to teach them. And I think when you said take the kid to the bathroom, spank them for 10 seconds, at 7 and 8, they should be past that, where if you taught them and said, "Hey, this is your situation," they should be well-rounded enough to be able to go to the airport without throwing a fit.
Yeah. And
yeah, absolutely.
so this is what I was. Okay, I remember what I was going to say. So if you and going along those same lines, if you asked a current criminal in jail what he would rather have, would he rather have 30 more months in prison or 30 lashes to the back? What would most of them say?
Lashes.
I would say prison time.
You would say prison time? So 30 more months away from your family as opposed to just getting it over with in 30 seconds.
The reason I say that is because, I mean, logically you would think, yeah, let's take the abuse, get it done, and get it over with. But where I grew up, I've known plenty of people that has ended up in jail. And family or not, there's a guy that stole my ma's ATV that she has, right? This guy has 5 kids supposedly. And the likelihood is he's going to run, leave his family behind, and go in hiding. Because he did that prior, and then they found out that after several years, he contacted his family and brought his wife and kids to where the area my mom lives in. And the people I've known, yeah, if it's somebody like, let's say you got caught stealing, right? And you got sent to jail, and your options were either get some lashes on the back or spend a year and a half in jail or whatever, or 2.5 years in jail. What are you going to choose? Most people that are attached to their family and have that sense of morality is going to choose, let me take the pain now and move on. But
that's what I'm asking. I'm not like asking as a general penal policy. Like if you ask most criminals, like their personal choice, what would they rather have?
Yeah, it's more of a contextual versus an absolute. You know, we're not talking about most
just
criminals.
A hypothetical.
Hypothetical.
Right. If you gave them the option, what would they take? Yeah. And that would give you a hint over.
We're not talking about somebody that's a sociopath.
Right, but
yeah, I agree. I agree. Like if there's some people, I mean, most of the crime today now is just committed by a very small minority of people. If you lock them up forever, most crime would go away. Yes, right. True. I'm just talking about in general. Like our society is so sentimental, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've sentimentalized everything, and so we think, well, we don't want to be cruel. We want to rehabilitate. We want to do this and this and this. But really, if you just gave people a choice, if you gave most criminals a choice, say, yeah, give me the 30 lashes instead of the 30 months. That's actually the less cruel thing for a lot of people. And it's the same for a child, right? Would you rather have 30 seconds of pain, or would you rather be grounded for a week? Would you rather wallow in your guilt and misery for a week, or would you just have it over, forgiven, done quickly? And then ask yourself what type of environment you want your home to be. One where everyone's just wallowing in guilt and it's never dealt with in a timely manner, or everything's taken care of immediately and it's done, and you don't have to think about it again just as soon as it comes up.
One of the things a lot of people don't actually think about, and honestly, politicians are the best at it. When you use time as something, well, I mean, what happens to the general public? So let's not to use left or right, but let's use the current people in office. What did they talk about? All this border stuff when he first got in office. And now that was 4 years ago, and literally everybody, even the people that were, that voted for him, were like up in arms. Oh my God, blah blah blah, this and that. And now today, 4 years later, new election. What did he use? He used time. And over time, all these people that were up in arms about whatever happened then and this and that, they've all forgotten. But now he's the one that is saying we should close the border. Meanwhile, 4 years ago, he was the one who opened the border. So that same scenario happens in children. Same scenario happens in prisoners. If you beat a prisoner or somebody who committed a serious crime in the very beginning, they almost catch the contextual understanding of what they did wrong. But if you throw them in prison for 30 months, by the time 30 months comes by, he's already kind of lost it with his head. Forget it, and he probably gets out and does it again or something. That's why there's a large repeat. The same similar scenario happens with children. If you let it waller in them for so long and keep telling them, they learn. I'm just going to get over it and probably even forget, honestly, what they did wrong. But if at the moment you stop it and you give them that discipline.
Yeah. And other people learn too. If it's if the punishment is quick and swift and immediate,
right?
Other people learn too. Like the other proverb, the wise take it to heart. Right? Those who are wise are going to learn the lesson. Other children will learn the lesson too. The simple or less mature might not. They might need more direct. But why in some of these cultures can you leave your backpack just in the open public and come back a day later and it's still there? No one's stolen.
Right.
It's because if someone steals it, they get their hand cut off. If everyone knows it. Everyone knows exactly what the consequence is, and that no one's going to hesitate from those consequences. And again, it's not advocating that, but it is like discipline works.
Oh yeah,
it just and it works as a general air and for everything around it. It really is in some cases healing, and it's civilizing and all that stuff. So it's as we over sentimentalize life, it will come to slap us in the face pretty hard over and over again.
I mean, and a lot of the things I hear a lot of people say about, over disciplining and doing stuff like that as well. Someone brought it up in the context of a dog with zoomies. You ever have a dog and you give them a bath, and when you dry them off with the towel, they get the zoomies and they immediately go, they go run around like a maniac. And then they eventually calm down, just because they're playing and goofing off. And somebody used that as a contextual idea, like, most children don't. Why don't children have that anymore? Why do we kind of work that out as adults? It's because we get, beaten and disciplined and this and that. And I was, no, not necessarily, because, a lot of people believe you're kind of hindrancing or what do you call it? Like dimming down their level of artistry or creativity and stuff like that when you discipline stuff like that. And I don't believe so. In my mind, I mean, which person have you seen that was so creative that wasn't disciplined? I mean, you can even just look at general society today. When you go to a new age modern art thing, what is it? Somebody slaps some paint on a thing and go art, but then you look at art, 1,000 years ago, when people, like you said, steal, they get their hand cut off. What was art in a painting back then? It was the most amazing, beautiful, sculpture or whatever. You know what I mean? So I don't think that even has anything to do with it. I think that's totally just another way to, virtue signal or make guilt trip or whatever you call it. So
yeah, we've seen when we leave people to their devices and without any discipline, we've seen exactly what they choose. And it's not creating works of art. It's
it's creating misery for other people.
It's sitting around at the best case, it's sitting around playing video games, smoking weed. The worst case, it's choosing to be homeless and shooting up and getting free.
Cutting their wieners off.
It's like, it's just we've seen what people choose without discipline.
Right.
I think to add on to that, it's also you look at the decline in the family structure, the traditional family structure, and without a father in the home that is willing to be the discipliner, willing to not spare the rod, as it said, but to save the child. And you look at it, and I can't get this out of my head after you mentioned it about the prison thing, but it dawned on me as we were talking that what tends to appear to happen, at least from what I've noticed and from the different things I've read, is the lack of fathers usually leads to lack of discipline. Because if you just have a mother who women tend to run more on emotional than logic, which I'm not saying women don't think logically, but their overall process of thinking is
I mean,
more of an emotional
the
process.
statistics back it up. So,
Right. But you look at it, when you mention what would a criminal prefer, well, everyone, if you get told that spanking is as bad as shooting somebody in self-defense, then what are they going to compare caning to or lashes? So, and your
yeah,
options are either, so you're raised that, hey, physical pain is bad. That's worse. I'd rather sit in the corner for a timeout, which is what prison is really coming down to, because you do have some bad people in prison that'll make life hell. But on the same note, they have cable, they have 3 free meals a day, they have exercise, they literally have everything they could possibly want, free medical. People go in with their, I knew one guy said he was going to go do something, so he goes into jail so he can get his teeth fixed.
yeah.
I
I know
mean,
homeless people I knew homeless people years ago when I lived in South Florida. That good place to sleep. Why
mhm.
not? But
So
my
I mean,
conspiracy theory going off again. What if all of these parenting books that advocate for timeout and stuff like that over spanking are paid by the private sector prison system to just a joke.
well, I understand, but I think a lot of it's people are so people have had that no spanking drilled, that gentle parenting drilled into their heads so much that unless you have a family that you need to get back to or that you want to get back to, most people, unless they have that driving factor to get back to their lives
Right.
and they know what they did was wrong. So, like, if you were drinking and driving and it was a complete mistake and you had the option of 2.5 years in jail or to be caned or spanked or lashed or whatever
Yeah.
method you chose, most people that have that kind of situation is going to choose the physical because they're going to say, hey, I need to get back to my life. But the
Yeah,
people
and
that,
maybe they'll think twice next time. They'll remember that pain.
Right.
right. But the
Oh, yeah.
people that are sitting there going, okay, well, I was never spanked. And what do I really have to get back to? I don't punish my kids, so my kids are out of hand. My wife is always yelling at me. My life isn't really great. I'm doing a life of crime now. So the likelihood is I'm gonna get caught again. So I'm gonna get punished again, which means caning, whip, whatever. What will you choose if you know your life is crime and being caught in all this? You know?
Mhm.
And you've been told spanking is like the worst thing it could be, and then you have something worse than spanking. So
Yep. Yeah, I think, and that's an important point, and why when I was talking about this recently, I made this my parenting hack number 3 with spanking and not before, because outside the context of a relationship, it is just abuse,
mhm.
right? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't accomplish
Yeah.
anything unless there's some type of relationship that needs to be restored. There's some kind of context of love and understanding. It's it's not going to do any good. You're just writing checks that can't be cashed. There's nothing in the bank, and so that is, I think, the most important part when we're talking about discipline. Is there has to be a relationship of love and responsibility as the context of it.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's do this because I have a feeling we could definitely dive into this even more because I have about 30 other ideas that I want to go into. And yeah, that would just lead us into another 3 or so hours of conversation. So
Yeah.
instead of doing that, M.A. Franklin, you have a website, you have a newsletter, you're on social media. Can you tell people where they want to find, if they want to find you to learn more about how to get on your newsletter, and I would highly suggest anyone listening to do so because it's well worth it. Or if they want to find your website and read your past articles, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can find me at foundationfather.com, and that's just the website and the newsletter. It's mostly free. I do have some paid posts, but it's mostly free content. It goes up at least once a week. I try to keep it once a week. But then I also have mafranklin.com, which anything that doesn't fall under the direct fatherhood family masculinity banner, I write over there. Just some more cultural essays. I have some fiction, and yeah, I just write. That's what I am. So, and Twitter's the big place where if you just want to get a quick taste of it, that's Foundation Dads, or X. So.
Yeah.
X.
And Mr. Pancake, you can be find on our website, Call with Dads, your own website, Pancakes with Your Dads. Where else do people reach out to you at?
Most of the spots are just social media. I would say I'm probably on Facebook and Twitter the most. And you can message me direct. I answer pretty much everybody. You can comment on my posts. I answer comments and stuff like that as well. If you want a one place fits all, definitely the website, pancakeswithyourdad.com. We do have a contact us page and stuff like that. So, and all of our social media is on there. You can click links and everything. Go follow everybody on all that spots.
All right. And for Call with Dads, obviously callwithdads.com, pretty straightforward. We're Twitter, X, we're somewhat on True Social still. We're just trying to be as active there as what we can. You can watch the videos on YouTube, Rumble. You can watch them about anywhere we can put them. The audio, I shove it everywhere I can find it so everybody can get this message as best as possible. And yeah, literally, if you want to reach out to me, reach out to Mr. Pancake, or have a question for any of the guests, go to the Contact Us page or go to X and find Call with Dads there. That's where I respond. Most of my social media messages is on X. And if you want to help the show, we have a shop page. Pancakes with Your Dad has a shop page. And we also are having affiliates that we're working with that you can see in the show notes or on our webpage. So with that being said, MA, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we could dig into this so much more and still scrape the top of it. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it definitely was. So I'm going to have you hold on for us just for a second. And everyone else, thank you. Goodbye. And yeah, take it easy.